It's Future Role Model, guys. I'm Natasha Pearl Hansen, and this is a podcast that praises the unconventional and redefines what it means to be a role model, because we all suck at life and we can still be badass in what we do. And today I have a very special guest who's one of my favorite people in comedy in LA, Bronston Jones.
Hello. Am I really?
Yeah. I just love Bronston. I don't know. You just are good vibes.
I wish I loved me as much as everybody else seems to love me. I really don't. I'm like, who's this guy they're talking about?
I've had a couple people say that to me. They're like, why do you like me so much? I'm like, I don't know. I just do. So go with it.
Okay. I'll go with it.
How have things been for you, Bronston?
Things are pretty good. Did my 7th Edinburgh Fringe in August. That was awesome. So much fun.
Fuck yeah.
And actually, the first time you go, it's 25 days. People don't know what it is. 25 days, world's largest arts festival. And every single day you do a show at a specific time slot. So 25 days of that. It's my 7th year going. The first year is overwhelming because you got to produce it, promote it, format it, load in the shows, load out. And this year I did a podcast, and which is not out yet, but it will be out very soon. It's called That's My Story.
Oh, nice.
With one of my best friends over there, Mr. Martin Moore. Very incredibly funny. One of the most interesting people I've ever met. Irish comedian. He used to be a circus performer, street performer, traveled the world.
Oh, I love that.
And then you have access to like talent from all over the map, and everybody's got stories. So that's a storytelling podcast. And then I had 2 separate hours. One was political. So, a lot of Trump talk. Yeah.
Which you can get away with overseas right now, especially. Yeah.
Well, they're just fascinating. I mean, but then again, in the UK, they have Brexit. They have their own issues.
Yep.
And, you see our issues are happening around the world. We just happen to have a bigger clown at the top of it.
Exactly.
And then I had a late night show that was, it was just about like drinking, drugs, sex. And it was supposed to be just this stupid throwaway because it was 11:30 at night at this bar that's known to have just drunk crowds. Mm-hmm. So Friday, Saturday, it was like just a wasted show where I'd just be like battling hecklers the whole time.
Yeah.
But my other shows, it ended up being possibly my favorite thing I've ever done, with this big philosophical message at the end.
That's so cool. Yeah. Did you happen to tape that?
I taped. The funniest thing is I realized that I could use my Zoom that I was using for the podcast, crank it into the audio system and get a clean mic plus an audience crowd. And I realized this at the end of the festival. I'm like, why did I not just tape all 25 of these? But I taped the last 3. The last one, I was so excited. I prepared everything. Usually I don't prepare into a set. I just kind of roll in and see where it goes. Yeah. And this one, I really kind of mapped it out. And I had this woman who, she's been to all my shows, but I have to throw her out of all my shows every year because she doesn't take her meds.
Oh, and yeah, so that'll be a problem.
Keep screaming, I love you, I love you, I love you, like to the point where you're like, I'm trying to do something. At one point, I even, like the other audience, they want me to just destroy her, but I know she has problems, so I won't. I'm just like, I need you to be quiet and let me do what I do. I'm trying to be very empathetic and sympathetic with her. Yeah. And at one point, I even stopped the show, walked over and talked to her for a minute. I'm like, you need to calm down.
And she didn't react to that?
Maybe lasted 5 minutes. And then either she loved, like, because, comedy's self-deprecating. I want to bust on myself up there. It makes it. And she's like, no, you're not. You're a good guy. And I'm like,
that's going to be like me one day when I'm off my meds, just following Bronston around, being like, I love you. Yeah. I don't know why.
You can draw me paintings. She showed up at my show and given me like gifts. Oh. Yeah, it's very sweet, but she's not well.
Is she a regular for you here too?
No.
Or just over there?
She lives over there.
Okay, cool. So your 7th year doing that, because we were just talking, we caught up for a couple of seconds before starting to record, but we were just saying how hard it is. Not hard because you're invested in it, but it's definitely challenging and exhausting to produce in a festival that you're also performing on. Yeah. Because I just did that in Montana and my insides feel completely dead. But I also went to Vegas on the 2 days after. So that's probably why too.
I think, after any really intense festival experience, I think you do need to take a break from comedy. I don't like Vegas. Vegas is always one of those. This is going to be the best break ever, but you realize you need a vacation from the vacation.
Exactly. Yeah, it was kind of like the thing that sent me over the edge, so I could come back and just say like, okay. Even today, I just sat in the parking lot at my bank for like 30 minutes and just like sat there with the car running, and I was like, this feels really nice. This is what moms must feel like when they have like 20 minutes in the car waiting for their kids.
like, let school, please let school. And late today, please hold them late. So
exactly.
car and listen to whatever.
Except comedy is our child. So it's like, I just need 20 minutes of a break from. So you have this long running show in Venice Beach.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a second. How did you get started with that, with Comedy Underground and making that a successful show out there and kind of getting your own audience in that space in LA?
So last night was our 370th show of Venice Underground Comedy at the Townhouse and Del Monte Speakeasy, which is right in the dead center of the boardwalk, like half a block off. It's actually where the original boardwalk was, where it used to be a huge amusement pier. There were roller coasters all around that area. And it's right where the Venice Circle is, which used to actually be a circle for the gondolas. And they would go up into those neighborhoods. Now there's only, I think, 6 blocks left of the canals.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a renowned spot too, because a lot of bands play downstairs there, and burlesque happens. It's kind of just open to the arts there.
Well, Venice is one of the last bohemian places left in Los Angeles, although that's sort of being challenged quite a lot by Snapchat and other tech companies with a lot of money, like sort of forcing people out. Snapchat did. If you have Snapchat, just delete it. I mean, the app's dead anyway. But let's just take it quicker. But what they did is they rented like beachfront places on Oceanfront Walk that should be, it should be for tourists. It should be, like either a little knick-knack shop or like food. And they kind of rented those to put their nerds in there to do computer stuff. And you're like, just put them like Google's at least a couple blocks off the beach, and they go further away from the beach, and they're on the beach, and that's just not. It's supposed to be for the locals, for artists, and for tourists.
Exactly.
And so they did that. But anyway, so let's get back to my show. Let's talk about what I care about rather than what I hate.
Right. Exactly. They balance each other well. So I'm glad we got both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. So Venice is one of the last bohemian places where, if you see somebody who looks like a broke artist, they're probably a broke artist. And, I've literally had a conversation there once where this was back when I was working in commercials. I used to direct and produce commercials. So, I was making a lot of money in advertising and TV promotion. And I was having a conversation outside of a bar with me, like a bartender who's a struggling actor, a homeless person, and one of the top 6 people at MySpace. So he was worth about $40-50 million bucks. And it's just this conversation where all of a sudden, maybe me as a comedian, I sort of recognized it, but I'm like, this is literally a guy who lives on the street with somebody having a normal conversation with somebody who has $50 million. Yeah. That's weird, with a struggling guy and a guy who's doing okay. And it was just a surreal thing. But that's what Venice is. It's a real community.
And what were you guys talking about?
We were probably just talking about, what's going on in the neighborhood. And like this was because I was still working in advertising. So this would have been like 9 years ago. Yeah. And so I don't remember the specifics of the conversation, but it is just about what happens in that neighborhood and different things. But so Venice is like this very weird, very raw community. And I actually describe it as it's almost like the Village of New York if you dropped a circus on top of it and put it next to a beach. That's
such a good description. Yeah. And I have so many friends that are really trying to make it as artists in that community. Like one of my friends, he's a painter, and he does a couple pop-ups in Venice every once in a while. And he'll sell his paintings for like good amount of money, but he'll sell like 5. And then he's got to try it all over again. And I don't think, I have conversations like this a lot with comics because all of us have to kind of do so many things to just keep ourselves afloat. Yeah. And I had a conversation, I was just reviewing this footage because I did somebody's travel podcast while I was in Montana. Okay. And so I was going back through all my old travel footage because I record on every trip. And I had done like a docuseries the first time I ever did a comedy tour in the Caribbean.
Yeah, you travel a lot.
I do.
You do.
Yeah. But so do you. I feel like we've seen each other almost in New York more this year than we have in Los Angeles, which is kind of funny.
I have that with a lot of LA comics where in New York, because New York is such a condensed area that you're not that far away from people. Yeah. And everybody's just walking around. Whereas here, if I'm at the Improv, I'm probably not going to go up to the store or Laugh Factory because they're, it's just
far enough apart. Exactly.
By the time you drive there, it's 20 minutes.
Totally.
And so I end up hanging out with comedians more in New York than I do here because here I drive to my stuff and then I go back to Venice. I honestly, I wouldn't leave Venice if it weren't for stand-up comedy. Yeah. Like I love that town. I was back to the show. I'll keep getting back to my show.
Get back to the show.
So basically, when I started the show, I started it. I never actually wanted to run a show in my life because it's so much work. I see how much work people do.
Yes, it's so much.
And I was looking for a venue. A friend of mine was like, I want to run a show in Venice. There's lots of cool, he wanted it to be this really weird, quirky, bizarre place. And I was like, oh, let me, look through the places I know in Venice. And I remembered seeing a band at the Townhouse probably about 20 years ago now. And down in the basement And I was like, I haven't been in that bar in years. And it used to be like the 7 a.m. it would open and the old dudes would just, instantly come in, elbows in the bar, and just like a really huge dive.
And was it Matt that came up to you and wanted to run the show?
No, what it was is, so I remembered that spot. And so I went in there and during the day on a weekend, and George, who's the old bartender there, if you ever went to History of Venice, go into the townhouse. If George is working, he will regale you with tales. He's one of the most interesting. He's like a Venice historian.
Oh, I'd love to interview him one day.
Oh, he's great.
I love that.
So I said, hey, you guys have a basement here. I remember seeing a band in the basement. He's like, oh yeah, but it's we just remodeled it. It's closed. We're waiting to get the liquor licenses and the certificate of occupancy or whatever to reopen it. Yeah. And I go, I'm looking for a place to run a show. Can I see it? And he goes, yeah. And so I walked down the back staircase by the pool table in the bathrooms, and I opened the curtains, and I looked at the room, and it just spoke to me. And I'm like, I'm running a show here. This is where I'm going to do it. And so I put together a whole proposal, named it Venice Underground Comedy, and sort of said that it's going to be raw and real like Venice is. Like LA is so plastic, but Venice is raw. It's real. And so I'm like, I'm going to bring in comedians who talk about their life, not talk about auditions. And I'll talk, I realize that's actors' lives here, but nobody cares about that. They
especially not in that part of town, and specifically that bubble. Yeah. And I that room is very, very real in the sense that like if your shit is bad, like they won't give you any leeway.
No. It's a hard room.
I have crushed there and I have bombed there.
I eat it in there every night. Like and like 150 people show up every week, and I would say 75 to 80 of them have been there before, and like 40 of them are there every other week, like a lot. Yeah. So they know me, they like Matt because we are the faces of it. Yeah. And it's very but there are so I get a lot of leeway, and so I host. So I'm sort of riffing on the spot. I had an idea for a story, and I'll start just telling it there. That's where all my stand-up
starts. Test everything out. Yeah.
But I can't do it again for another couple of weeks because they'll be there next week and they can't hear the same shit every week. And so they give me a lot of leeway because I think they think of me more as a personality than necessarily a comedian, But usually I can get the crowd fully cracked so there's no bullet. The first comic's got a hot crowd.
You do a really good job of that.
But every now and then, man, I eat it. And I'm like, what? Oh. I'm like, okay, well, let me go into the drug stuff. They're like that. And they're like, not tonight. We don't like the drug stuff. And it is, they don't heckle a lot. Every now and then we do get assholes who heckle, but it's more like they just start talking to themselves and just looking at their phone because they're just like, I don't care about this person. So I always tell people go in, be aggressive and raw and talk about your real life, talk about your real problems, and they will lock right in because they're Venice people. They've got issues. Yeah,
I mean, I think the worst bomb I ever had there, because I've played that room. God, I mean, you guys have put me up like every year on my birthday for sure, plus a few other times a year. I mean, I've probably done it like over a dozen times. I feel like
definitely.
And there was one time, God, it was like 3 years ago, and I know the room is like that, and I know it's a room that you can kind of open up like that in. But I went in with material that I had just kind of written it the day before, and I had a spring where like 3 people that I knew had died, and so I was trying to talk about that, and it was way too dark for them. But they were paying attention, which was fine. But it was definitely like it was just not a good set, and I was like, "Damn, this crowd is exactly what it needs to be." Like this was all my fault that I failed on stage here.
No, but I would say that's not a failure. I'm not the kind of comic who, a lot of comics are like laughs per minute. They like joke.
I don't care about that whatsoever.
I think if you're being raw and you're being real and you're telling a story that's from your real life, as long as they're looking at you and they're focused on you, then you're engaging them.
Exactly.
There's a great George Carlin quote. It's in my phone somewhere, but he said it, like he didn't think that laughter was the only means of knowing your success. It's not the only currency. Yeah. He goes, if the audience is engaged, or more importantly, if I'm engaged, then I've done my job for them. Right. And so, that's one of the greats. Not that we're going to compare ourselves to them, but it's like you can look at them for confirmation that you're doing the right thing as long as they're paying attention. You're entertaining them, just not in a way that
Right. Not in the way you were expecting. Exactly. Yeah. So does it feel like you kind of have, I feel like you kind of have these pockets, like you have Venice that everybody knows Bronston Jones, and then you have a big following in New York, and then you have this huge following over in Edinburgh because you've been there so many times and you have all these shows that you've done there. I mean, do you feel like those are kind of like your home bases in a way?
Venice is definitely my home. I have 4 homes. I have Venice. I have Yardley, Pennsylvania, where I grew up. So I have all my friends who are still there, and like a lot of my family's still there. And I have New York City because I've fallen in love with New York. And the thing about the comedy community is the New York, there are New York comics, but they're out here all the time and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I think comedians at a certain level, you all get to know each other, at least a hello, how you doing?
For sure, especially on the coasts.
And then over in the UK, because I've done it 7 years in a row, gone to Edinburgh. So there are friends that I've some of my best friends in the world. Janie Godley is one of my best friends in the world. She's a Glaswegian comedian. And to describe her in the U.S. way is she's like a 5'3" 55-year-old Scottish Joey Diaz.
Oh
female.
My God.
Yeah.
That is the greatest description for anybody ever.
And her storytelling is through the roof. She doesn't take shit from anybody in the crowd.
I love that.
She's like, she used to be a barmaid. She used to own a pub, and she's in Glasgow, east end of Glasgow, which is rough, especially back in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And she goes, I've dealt with worse people than anybody's ever in these crowds. She can handle it. But she's like one of my best friends in the world. Like, I love her. And a lot of people will know her. If you've ever seen a picture that went viral during the primaries of a little tiny Scottish woman talking to a policeman on the edge of a road with a big green hill behind her, and on top of the hill is a huge sort of mansion-looking country club golf resort, and then there's a helicopter there. It's Trump's helicopter, and she's holding a sign that just says, "Trump is a cunt." And that picture went viral. And what's so funny is somebody sent me that photo they're like, "Oh, Brian, you'd love this." And I'm like, not only do I love it because that's Janie. She summed up my entire hour of my political show.
Yeah.
She sums up in 4 words.
Wow.
Yeah, she's amazing.
And people like that fascinate me. I'm starting this series called Beers with Old People, where I'm going to travel and just interview people that are above a certain age. I haven't really picked the age yet, but just people that are okay with just joking about the fact that they're older and have seen some shit. And that's those are exactly the type of people's stories that I would want to get. Somebody who's just kind of seen a bunch of shit from all over the world by living in one place, especially pub owners. I feel like they deal with the worst of the worst.
Well, they deal with people at their worst.
Exactly.
So
because drunk people are the unfiltered version of themselves.
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up in Pennsylvania, and how'd you get into this comedy scene in the first place?
I moved her a lot before I was 7 or 8, and then basically ended up in my mom's hometown where basically my dad left when I was 7, and we ended up moving in with my grandmother, whose husband had just left. So it was sort of our family, gave my grandmother some stability with people in the house. Yeah. And, definitely helped my mom out because there's me, my brother, and my older sister. And it was very kind of Norman Rockwell kind of a town, where we'd ride our bicycles in, a lot of cornfields surrounding it, which are now, complex, housing complexes. And, very nice, very conservative. I was raised, because anybody who knows me knows I'm a raging liberal now, into socialism.
And I think that's what comedy does to us, because I'm from a similar type of town, cornfields, very, very Republican, and I'm completely different now too. So, I think that's just kind of what being exposed to things starts to do to you.
I think ignorance, which is where racism and everything happens, is what I think the solution to is education. You have to educate people how other people are. You have to expose them to people who look different than them, who believe in different things than them. And then you need empathy on top of that to realize we are all just trying to get through this world.
Exactly.
Together.
We're all just trying to not die.
Not every Muslim is a terrorist, but not every Christian is also blowing up a Planned Parenthood. So you know what I mean? We've got crazy everywhere. There's Buddhists right now attacking Muslims in Myanmar. And when you go, wait, isn't Buddhism all about being Zen and stuff? And you're like, yeah, but at the same time, they're also going in and slaughtering these villages.
Did you watch the Last Week Tonight on Myanmar?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's very educational. If you don't know the situation that's going on over there right now, basically, Facebook is somewhat responsible for giving people a lot of the wrong information. But anyway, we're not going to go into the political stuff, but it's just really interesting how if you aren't exposed to these other cultures and to what other people are going through. Yep. And we actually have a reason to want to know because we want to write about it, or at least have enough wherewithal that if we're addressed by somebody from one of those backgrounds that we know how to handle it. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's a big thing in comedy and why I've bonded with so many more comics over the last decade, because we all see so much shit and we know so many crazy people that we when we find the good, we kind of gravitate towards it.
Yeah. I think we're desperate for attention and if you didn't have
love.
I don't understand comedians who grow up in a stable household with where education and work was sort of like the themes, you know what I mean? Like where your parents were like, no, go to college and get this stable job. And it's like, how did you end up in this business that's such a risk? And it's also so, it's just so needy. Like I will tell things to 150 strangers that I wouldn't tell to my therapist.
Exactly.
Because I know they'll react positively. And I'm like, oh, so it's not even therapy I'm doing. I'm regaling idiot decisions I've made.
Yeah. I was just talking with this on Candace Thompson's podcast last week, but I was saying how I did go to therapy 2 sessions last year because I was looking for an answer that I just knew I had for myself. And then I ended up finding it on stage, and then I just stopped going to therapy.
Oh, that's healthy.
I was like, oh, I guess I'm not really telling her the truth because I'm going to just save it for like a set anyway. So it's just really interesting thing to learn about myself, the whole therapy thing. How did you end up getting into comedy from where you grew up? Like, how was that transition?
Okay, so let's see. I'll go through my history. Okay, so grew up in this upper middle class sort of environment, just with no dad. So that's my damage. That's why I'm doing stand up.
No relationship with your dad?
No, 0.
Okay.
And so then I went to a prep school, like a boarding school. Like I was a day student, but like one of those Dead Pope Society schools.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's literally the most expensive school in the whole country right now. If you paid full boat boarder, which is almost nobody.
Wow.
So I went from there to Johns Hopkins my first year because I thought I wanted to be a doctor. Everybody was such nerds that I couldn't stay there because it would be like a Thursday or Friday night. And I'm like, let's go out because there was this one bar right off campus where even as an 18-year-old you could get served.
Uh-huh.
And my friends are like, no, I got to study. I have a test on Wednesday. And I'm like, it's Friday night. And where people come out of their tests and they puke because their nerves are up. I mean, it's such a pressure cooker place. And it's all these nerds. And actually one of the funniest things is there was this one guy from my high school who also went there. And he was like a super math nerd geek, kind of like only hung out with, like the math nerds,
Uh-huh.
And that's it. That's a fine demographic, fine little core group of people. They were in the computer club. They were trying to memorize pi out to as many digits as possible.
Oh my God.
And when we get to Hopkins, he had way more friends than I had. And I was just like, this is not how the world's supposed to work.
And you were like,
social.
I can't. This isn't my space. Yeah. These aren't my people.
So I told my mom, I'm like, I'm dropping out of college. This college isn't for me. I don't want to be with these people. And she goes, no, just pick a more fun school. So I went from Johns Hopkins to University of Colorado Boulder, which is a top 10 party school.
Yeah, that's such a fucking switch.
Yeah. And realized that I could still get drunk every weekend and still, get
be
good
smart.
grades.
And yeah.
And then I started working so I stayed in Colorado for a few years. Colorado's amazing. I love it. Every now and then I think maybe I'll move back.
Yeah.
But, actually, right now I'm in a really down space in my not my career, but just like what I'm doing. I'm like, let's go back to Colorado and be a road comic for a bit, and then I'll come back.
Yeah.
I can't leave Venice.
Yeah, no, you can't.
So I ended up there, and then I started working on movies of the week and different commercials that were coming through Denver. And then I realized I wanted to be a producer or a director, and all of them were coming from New York, Chicago, or LA.
Mm-hmm.
Like very little stuff was generated in Denver itself. Be local, like Giant Outweigh Ford commercials, that sort of stuff. So I said New York or LA, and I said LA, and so I just kept moving and eventually hit the beach. But so for I did my first open mics in 1993 at Comedy Works in Denver, which I did not realize it is one of the top 3 clubs in the country. I think it's my favorite.
It is
the first one I ever stood on. Also, they have the Yonder bags, that cell phone thing. So I mean, everything about that place, everything about what Wendy's done there is amazing. And so I did my first 3 open mics there. Had no idea how good the club was until 2016. I went back to feature for Dean Del Rey and actually realized how incredible that club is. And to go back, because I'd given up comedy for a long time because I was working in production, worked my way up to directing commercials and producing. And I realized I didn't love that. 2008 hit, the economy kind of crashed. There was way less work. And I realized how annoying it was with people calling me looking for work because I had a company with my brother that I couldn't call the ad agencies or promo people every week. You got to give them space because there's no work. So, and I dabbled in comedy, and I'm like, oh, I'll go back and it'll be something to do. And within like 3-4 months, I was like, I don't care if I ever stand on another set. I just want to
do comedy.
And
you were before the podcast too, you were talking about how Dean Del Rey is one of your role models.
Yeah.
How long of a relationship have you guys had?
I've known him since, because he only really started comedy 7 or 8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a professional musician forever, which is how, the hardest thing in comedy is getting comfortable on stage and being free to do your thing. And Dean is probably the hardest working guy I know in comedy. I mean, there might be more hardworking people, but he's completely dedicated to that, to his podcast. You know, he did all his partying in his 20s and 30s,
Right.
and got that out of his system. And so that's what I look towards, is every now and then I'm like, because I still drink like an idiot, and I still, you know, party, and I'm just like, you know what? Why? What's the point of this when I could be working? I could be putting out the emails, putting out the calls. My main issue isn't the nighttime when the time I'm wasting at night. It's the time I'm wasting during the day, being like hungover and like
right.
depressed.
Yeah, and that's a big balance. I think a lot of people have trouble striking. But ever since I lived in Chicago, somebody did tell me that the time you spend during the day should be devoted to your career if your career is your job. Yeah. So that's something that I've always been really good about doing, is, you know, treating it like a 9 to 5. Yeah. And I still like to party too. But, you know, I just take a couple, what do you call those, amino acids before I go to bed and wake up feeling great.
I thought you were going to say I'd take a couple Adderall and just get my shit done.
Amino acids are the best thing ever.
I think part of my problem is I moved here in 95. I was 25 years old. And I moved here with the idea I am going to direct. And I'm going to direct a movie and produce. And so I bought the LA 401, which sort of is all online now, but it's this big book that had everybody who worked in commercials and music videos.
I remember that book.
And I went through it, and I called every production, and I highlighted it with the yellow, meaning I left a message for this production manager, and then if I talked to him, it was orange so that I could go over the yellow. And, you know, left my name and number for all these people. And I really approached it the way I should approach comedy. And so within 4 months, I'm in Africa as a production coordinator on a Michael Jackson music video.
Oh my God.
And then within a year, I had directed my first music video. I was working with this guy who was doing Dr. Gary, and he was Gary Bass, and he was doing all of these. He was doing an entire album for this band called X Japan, which is a massive. It was like sort of an all-star like metal group in Tokyo, and he was doing their whole album. And I was coordinating and production managing on these music videos. And then he's like, hey, Bron, you seem creative. Listen to this song. Because he had to come up with a treatment for every single song. And that's hard. Yeah, it's hard to do when you're trying not to repeat yourself with the same band. And he sent me the song, and it was really crazy and weird. And it was just dark. And so I wrote this treatment that involved, you know, like witches, and not witches, but like just all this sort of underground bizarro stuff with body piercing and stuff. And he goes, oh, this is great. Do you want to co-direct it with me? And so within a year, I got to stand there on the set and really learn how a director works, you know?
Damn.
And it's actually still one of my favorite things. If you can find it online, it's called White Poem. And you will think I'm insane because there's literally people hanging with fish hooks on their back and like body piercing with like.
Sour Girl was one of my favorite music videos ever, and it's the creepiest thing. Yeah. Hey, do you remember that one? With you'll have to look that up when you get home. Sour Girl by Stone Temple Pilots. Okay. It's the creepiest music video. It's like eerie Teletubbies in this barren wasteland.
Yeah, I remember that.
With Sarah Michelle Gellar, I think. But I love that shit. I love weird music videos.
I'll tell you one of my I have two moments in life where if I had done something that I was thinking about doing at the time, I think my life would have been different. That video is super dark. It's super creepy. And it's like I literally had one video commissioner go, you got to tell people that you're sending this because this is disgusting. You know, and like there's a version of it online that I've done where I pulled out all the
extra weird stuff. Yeah.
But everything else in it's still weird, and like weird gymnastics going on, people body painted. It's crazy. But I was at the Beverly Connection, which I don't know if you remember that. It's like right across the street from Beverly Center.
Yep.
And, you know, you used to have a good movie theater there. And I was in there, and I went into there was some kind of not record shop, but electronics store, you know, with a wall of TVs and stuff. And I was in there, and Marilyn Manson was in there. I think he was dating Rose McGowan at the time. I don't really remember.
That sounds about right. 90s.
Yeah. And this is like the prime, like right after Beautiful People and all these things had exploded, which like literally my video is darker than Beautiful People. And I'm like,
I got to look it up now.
I'm like, I gotta show this to him. I gotta show this to him. Like he needs to see this. This how. And so I literally ran to my car, pulled the VHS out of my car. I got in there. And I said to the guy, I'm like, is there any way you can plug this into the wall of TVs? Can you plug this into the wall of TVs? He's like, no, what are you doing? And I'm like, this is a music video. He needs to see it. He's here right now. And the guy's like, give me the tape. And so he kind of disappears. And then all of a sudden my video comes up on all the things. But Marilyn Manson had already walked out. So I'm like, I missed it by 30 seconds where I think he would have been like, what the fuck is this?
Okay, so in an alternate universe, if that had gone the way you saw it going, what do you think you would be right now?
I think I still would have quit the commercial music video
exactly.
industry.
I think you still find your way eventually.
Or I'd be directing movies and I'm like, I hate horror. Why am I directing horror movies?
All right, and what was time number 2?
Time number 2 is do you remember that band Metal School? Have you ever seen them? It's basically it's now called Steel Panther.
Oh yeah, I know Steel Panther.
Yeah, so Metal School was their original name, and then their manager was screwing them, but he owned the name, so they changed it to Steel Panther.
Steel Panther's way better.
But they had that residency on Mondays at House of Blues.
Yeah.
And remember the thing, if you were famous and you walked in there, you were getting pimped on stage. Like, but you kind of, like every musician who went in there, they knew that if they walked in there and they're famous, that they're going to be dragged on stage.
Yeah.
So I was in there one night with my buddies, and they ended up bringing Chad Kroeger on the stage, the lead singer of Nickelback.
Yeah.
And so he actually, like, the guy has a great voice, right?
He does.
And they sang actually like Big Wheels Keep On Rolling. They didn't do one of his songs. They did like a classic from the 60s. And I was like, this is cool. But then afterwards, I sneak my way into the foundation. I'm the master of sneaking into places. Like my size, I shouldn't be able to sneak anywhere. But so I'm in the foundation room hanging out. And he's kind of in there. There's a whole posse of people. They're in there. And I'm standing at the bar, and I'm trying to get a drink. And the guy's like, oh, it's your last call. You can't get one. And so Chad rocks up, and he goes, yeah, can I get 5 beers? And the guy's like, yeah, you can get 5. And I go, dude, make it 6. And he goes, what, do you want a free beer? And I'm like, you're getting free beer. And he goes, good point. So he brings me, I get my beer. And then he's sitting there talking to people. And I start talking to this really pretty girl who's just sitting in a chair looking kind of mopey. And I'm like, why do you look so sad? And she's like, oh, my boyfriend's here. I just don't want to be here. I want to go do something else. I'm like, who's your boyfriend? And she kind of motions over to Chad. And I realize, she's a rock star's girlfriend. Like, there's only so many times you can hang out in the green room before you're like, dude, can we just go home?
Right.
Or go somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And so we're shooting the shit. And then some security guy who's with them was like, dude, I don't think she wants to talk to you. And I'm like, she's totally talking to me. She's like, yeah, we're fine. What are you talking about? Like she's trying to protect Chad's property.
Of course, which I get.
So then we stand up, and everybody's like, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? Like, all of them are saying that. I go, hey, we're right across the street from the Comedy Store. Now, if you know, the Comedy Store used to run until like 4 in the morning. Like, they pull all the liquor, but then the shows would just keep going on forever. Yeah,
and people could drink behind it. I mean, at least that's what it was like when I moved here in late 2000.
Yeah, you're not violating your liquor license if it's closed in the back. It's just for employees and staff or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey, a lot of times this place goes off till 4. Why don't we go over there? So we go running across Sunset. And we get onto the patio, and I look in the original room, and it's dark. I'm like, oh, fuck, we missed it. It's over. Yeah. And so now there's like 8 of us standing there. But the whole time, Chad's like, wow, who's leading this pack here? Because he's 6'5", I'm 6'7". He's a big guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he is.
And so he's used to be an alpha, and all of a sudden he's following someone else. He's like, what the fuck? Like you could see it, like even if he's not conscious, that happens in the alpha brains. We're like, whoa. Mm-hmm. So then we're standing there, and he's like, why do we come over here? And they're like, oh, this guy's a comic. And he's like, you're a comic. Tell me a joke. And we all know.
Of course, it's like everybody's least favorite thing ever.
And I go, I'm not going to tell you a joke. That's like me saying, hey, you're a singer. Sing me a song. If this motherfucker didn't start singing right on the patio
oh my God.
the Comedy Store.
What?
And he's singing, and he actually has a very beautiful voice.
Oh, yeah.
I can't take
he has
that
a
away
killer
from
voice.
Him. It's just their music's so cheesy. If they did better music, they wouldn't be regaled as
It's Nickelback the way that they are.
So then, so he's singing, and I go like this. I go, shh. And he just stunned, stops singing. His friends start laughing. I go, see? Funny and effective.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
So now I have his posse laughing at him, and that's not something acceptable to a rock star.
No.
To an alpha male rock star. And he starts going, what's your problem, man? What's your problem? And he didn't touch me. He didn't push me. But I could tell if I kept pushing at him, it would have been a fist fight. So my worst regret, and because then he had just grabbed us, like he started like there was these street cones out there. Mm-hmm. He started throwing them into traffic, like trying to be rock star cool. But I'm like, dude, you're throwing a street cone.
Like you can drive right over it too. Yeah, like people do it all the time.
But my regret is that I didn't keep pushing him, because I realized if I had pushed him to the limit where we actually got in a fist fight, whether I won or lost, I would have been on every single radio show the rest of my life going, tell us a story about how you and Nickel Douche got in a fight on the Comedy Store patio. Not even out in the wild, on the sacred ground.
Oh, shit.
And so I'm always like, I should have pushed him to fight. I should have pushed him to fight.
Did you ever see him along the lines since then and just be like, yeah, remember I was that guy?
No, but actually, I wonder, the look on his face when I shushed him was fucking classic.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure that must have been. So you've been doing comedy, since...
So 10 years of how long I've been taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Like 93, I did it. So I guess I'm 25 years in, but I don't count a couple open mics.
Right.
And then I hobbied it for a little while, but for 5 years I didn't do it at all. So
really 10 that you've been hustling on the comedy scene.
I don't know if I've been hustling, but 10 that I've been on the
doing
scene.
Enough of it. What has been your favorite part of the journey so far? I mean, I know you said Dean's a role model of yours now, but was your mom a role model for you growing up, or like how did you realize you had any humor in your body?
My sense of humor comes from my mother and my grandmother, and my mom is truly like a hero. Like I'm a humanist. I'm an equalist. Like, you know, like you somehow or another, the word feminist has a negative connotation, which it's not. It's not about women having more than us. It's about everybody being equal.
Exactly.
That's my whole thing. I don't think white privilege is a privilege. I think it's right. We just need to figure out how to give the same rights that we have as white people to everybody else. It's not. Our only privilege is that we can think that they don't have problems, but
exactly.
It's like it's every right that I'm granted as a straight, white, educated, middle class, tall male. Every other human being on this planet deserves. Like, and I realize I have these things. And so, anyway, so I'm an equalist. I believe that because my mom went through, you know, the drama of my dad leaving and us.
And sending you to expensive schools on her own. And that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is like her father was very, he's self-made man, but very, very successful. And so, you know, so I'm not saying we did not grow up in poverty. We still grew up in middle class, like country clubs and stuff.
Sure.
It's just I didn't have a dad, so that's my damage. But, and so she had help from her parents, which, you know, a place to stay with her 3 kids. But she started her own business, and basically she was working in real estate and realized that there should be like a newspaper that sort of said what was going on, like a quarterly newspaper, like what are the schools like in this area? What are the SATs, blah, blah, blah. Because it's a very kind of upscale, you know, conservative part of the world we're in. And she started this paper with her friend. It was quarterly. And then basically there ended up being 5 or 6 different papers around there. So she's like, you know, she's an entrepreneur and made her own business.
So just hustled.
Successful, yeah. And so I always look up to her as like, you know, like she's, you know, I'm not a mama's boy because I'm not like she also made me think that, no, you don't have a headache. Just get up. Like I missed maybe 5 days of school ever for illness.
Yeah.
She's like, you're not sick. Go to school. And so she's not like that. So I'm not a mama's boy that way, but I'm like every woman I'm with has an enormous amount that she's being compared to because like my mom's not weak. No matter what she went through, she was never weak. And she's incredibly smart, beautiful. And so I'm like, women, that's the bar that's been set. And
did having her in your life at that age, because I don't know what age you were when your dad left, but did you want to behave or did you do any fucked up things as a kid?
No, I was actually kind of a model child.
So you were like a role model kid. Yeah,
like school. I always took school was easy for me, but I took it seriously. Like always got my homework in, et cetera. But I was also like, you know, an A, B student who, you know, on weekends, me and my buddies, we'd go out and do the white middle class vandalism, like we turf lawns and egg stuff, you know, what I mean? Like all that stuff, which I still think is funny.
We even did that too. We didn't vandal as much as we did steal beer. Like we would pull up to empty garages at night and just walk in and just hope nobody was watching and just steal their beer. Because if a garage had a fridge, you knew it was in Wisconsin that they had beer. Oh, yeah. And so that's where we would just steal.
You were breaking and entering.
We would steal people's beer out of their garage. Yeah.
I was kicking over mailboxes. You were actually breaking into
stealing
houses.
Actual beer from people's homes.
That's a lot of crimes all in one.
I know, it really is. At what point did you become more Bronston-y? Because the place in which you're describing.
What is Bronston?
Bronston-y, I just feel like you have so much edge to you. And obviously where you grew up didn't inspire that. So that came from somewhere.
A lot of that came from. So the comedy I did before 2008, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the comedy I did in the early 2000s. It was very observational. It was very Jerry Seinfeld. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Let's just make fun of little stuff out here.
And that's kind of what it was like then too. Like
Yeah.
a lot of people wrote that way.
And like I'd go to gigs and I'd listen to Jerry Seinfeld. Like if I had to go all the way to the Ice House, I'd listen to Jerry Seinfeld, I'm telling you for the last time, which I actually worked on in production. Like I was the production coordinator on the opening scene, which is like a
that's
funeral
cool.
scene. But I'd listen to that and listen to Chris Rock, which are two sort of, they're friends, but it's two totally different styles of comedy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I would listen to 8 Mile. Because as my little brother said, he goes, 8 Mile is a song that makes white people think they can do anything.
That's so true.
So,
oh my God.
And that's how I pump myself up to go tell these stupid, completely meaningless jokes.
Uh-huh.
And then, so 2008, after my 5-year hiatus and the economy started crashing. Also, I didn't tell any personal jokes because I had my girlfriend and I wanted to protect her. Like I was with a girl for 14 and a half years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Kristen, she's still one of my best friends I'll ever make in my life. And she's married, she has kids, and it's almost like those are my nieces.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, Kristen, hello.
Interesting.
She gets annoyed because I think any podcast like this, she's like, why do you keep talking about me? I'm like, because 14 and a half
14
years is a long
huge
time.
chunk of your life. Yeah.
She's like, talk about somebody else. Find a girlfriend who's not a piece of shit. I'm like, yeah, I should do that. So I protected her, so I didn't want to talk about any relationship stuff, or maybe it was protecting me. But 2008 hit, and I realized I loved it. Now you loved yelling at sort of society a lot more, like corporations. Even though I was working in advertising, I realized how manipulative what I did was.
Right.
And so I started talking about that. Started talking about my real life because I was, alone, single guy. So a lot of my early stuff, if you find early stuff online, it's misogynistic, I'm guessing, because it was all like me being a playboy kind of a thing. Because I was in the first.
Yeah, and that's stuff you grow out of. Like that's me in the sex stuff. When I was younger, I was like straight up just dirty jokes, and now I'm like, God, I can't believe I wrote about this. So that should be how it is.
I think it is. It's weird that we evolve, but anyway, so I've evolved a lot. But the more I got into it, the more I realized how fucked up the world is. And like Kristen, when we would go travel, she would drag me to like literally we'd be in Thailand, and you think, oh, did you go to Koh Samui or Phuket? And I'm like, no. We went to we visited this refugee camp and walked through it, talked to the people there, and like, you know what I mean? Like she went
really heart.
The reason we broke up because she moved to Africa to save the planet. So that's what I was dealing with, and so
she was just really fucking good.
Yeah, and she taught me empathy, and so I learned that not everybody learned how to swim in a country club. Right. A lot of people don't know how to swim at all, and you can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you don't have boots, and nobody in your family has ever owned a boot. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of learning that the poverty you see in like Mexico and Thailand and stuff is unlike the poverty we have here, and you realize these people have no hope of having a life like I did. Like it's a literal impossibility that they could live as easily as I do. And so the more I got into that, then I started doing comedy, and I started putting more of that stuff into my comedy, where you realize how just our country is amazing, but it's so run by money, and so many people really can't get through that. And also because I'd already made a lot of money in my 20s and 30s. And bought Apple, which everybody's like, do you have a trust fund? I'm like, nah, it's just I bought Apple at the right time, but it's almost gone, so I will be working again soon. I realized that the system is so rigged that I wanted to talk about it. And I think that it comes from people, like I said earlier, all the privilege I have, it's I want to give that privilege to everybody else. And me giving someone else the same rights I have doesn't take any rights away from me. Right. There's a lot, especially when you look at the Trump supporters where they're like, oh, the immigrants are stealing our jobs and all that stuff. You're like, no, they're not. They're just trying to work. You need to figure out how you can lead your life, and don't blame somebody who's poorer than you. Why don't you look up at the tax breaks we're giving to the Waltons and the Walmarts?
Exactly.
And, I'm sure this is 2,000 different people's bits, but the true criminals wear suits. It's the bank robbers are the guys running the banks. Well,
and I love that that's your opinion, because it's just true. And me and my fiance always talk about this, but like just to get ahead in LA, like if you were to tell somebody back in the Midwest what you've worked all these years to make, they'll be like, oh, sounds like you're doing good. But I'm like, you can't to live off of a normal Midwest salary here is an impossibility.
Yeah.
And people live off a third of that all over the country. You know, we just choose to live in such an expensive city. But doing what we do, and the fact that we just don't get paid anything for so long, like, makes you have to hopefully humble yourself down to other people's level and travel the way that you have, and expose yourself to the fact that there are people that are so much worse, and we're choosing to do this, which is interesting. Like, we make this choice. Other people are trying to make a choice to make more money, and they just can't.
Yeah, I think a lot of people literally don't have they don't have a choice. They're stuck where they are, and they really are. Because I'm always like, why would you stay in Detroit? Detroit's a dying city. Like, I mean, it's kind of it's on the resurgence, but you think why? Or and you realize they have too many ties there. It's hard for them to get out. Like, they can't just be like me as a single guy, and I have no accountability to anybody, zero, which is not necessarily a good thing, because it means I can sit around and do zero.
But at least you don't. I mean, do you think Edinburgh is going to be something you continue to do every single year now?
I hope so.
And what would be your ideal goal out of that? I mean, do you want to tape your own special at some point, and would you do it there?
Oh, I already taped a really horrible one. You can find it on Amazon Prime. Just search Bronston Jones. I taped a CD and a special way before I was ready. So yeah, check it out. It's called She Has to Take This Call, and you will hear. And also, we made the decision in the mix to leave. Let's not pump up the laughter too much. Let's bring it down. So it sounds like I'm waiting for laughter to end that you can't hear. I'm really, really proud of this piece of garbage that has my name on it.
Hey, you know what? And I've proudly said this before. I put out plenty of garbage in my early 20s. Like, YouTube was new essentially when I was just coming into the entertainment field. You know, I was 20 when I was working at Second City. So anytime somebody was like, "Do you want to do this sketch? Do you want to do this sketch?" I was like, yeah. You know, you put out plenty of garbage in your lifetime. That is fucking fine. Yeah. You know, there's lots of times you're going to be a garbage person. There's a lot of times you're going to make garbage. Eventually you'll stop being a garbage person, and eventually, hopefully, you'll stop making garbage. Hopefully. Do you think you would ever direct, now that you have this past in directing? Yeah. Would you ever direct other people's specials? I
would like to. And there was a moment I was talking to a guy about doing one, because I worked on 3 HBO specials that I'm telling you for the last time. The David Brenner special and Sandra Bernhard. I worked with Marty Callner, who is like an icon in music videos from the 80s, but also live directing, like Garth Brooks in the Park, Madonna.
Oh, nice.
3 different live Rolling Stones, almost all of the Robin Williams specials. Like, if you guys want to look at an awesome Instagram, look up Marty Callner and go through, like, because he's doing, he either just turned 70 or 80. I don't know. Sorry, Marty, if I aged you, but he's doing a retrospective, so every week is on a different band or a different artist, and it's incredible going through, and you look at who he worked with. And so to work on those specials was amazing, and I also got to see how they were done, because as we're coming from, music videos, commercials, all single camera, but with the specials, it's all multi-camera. And my brain still does click in whenever I'm anywhere near a set where I'm just looking at how it's lit and what's going on, because once you have that knowledge, you can't unlearn it. Yeah. Like, I don't know all the new gear, because it's been 5 years since I've been on a set, or as anything other than talent. And but the camera angles and the lensing, that stuff all stays the same. The lighting stays the same. Exactly. It's just a different unit to do it. The vendors have all changed. But anyway, I'm literally at the point where I'm starting to put my foot back in the water to get back into directing commercials, music videos, but I would love to do specials. Anyway, I was talking to a guy about doing his, and then it didn't work out because he's going to do it in a different country.
Fucking do Dean Del Rey's.
I would love to.
Do Dean Del Rey's next special.
This is a crazy story about Dean. Is I met him 3 years before he started comedy, and we didn't figure it out until way later. Which is, I have a Harley, which I bought on the East Coast, and drove back to the West Coast. And my little brother always wanted to. So for a while, I was my little brother's role model, and then I think he realizes that I'm a bit of an idiot. But we had a company together. We had all these shoots going on, and so we were just like, people in our. He was in his 20s with too much money, and he's always like, "Yeah, man, you got that Harley, and I want to ride to New York and meet my buddy on a Harley and ride around the country." And I was like, "You've never ridden a motorcycle in your life, like zero."
Yeah, that would be a very bad idea.
So, but then all of a sudden we have. All this, we're flush with cash. So I do what a big brother does. I'm like, let's go look at motorcycles. So we went to Van Nuys Harley Davidson dealership where I helped him pick out his bike, like based on he wants to travel the country. Like there's only certain bikes that are good for long trips, Road Kings or Ultra Glide. And Road King is way cooler. And I helped him pick out, and then he picked out the color. But I had to test drive it, and I had to ride it home because he didn't know how to ride. But it turns out, we figured this out years later, is Dean Del Rey, between being a musician and starting comedy, he was a salesman at Van Nuys Harley Davidson dealership.
Oh, shit.
And as I'm on a podcast talking to him about motorcycles, it clicked. I'm like, that voice, there's only one guy with his voice. I'm like, he sold me the bike. Or sold my brother the bike, and I was sure of it, but there's none of the salespeople's name shows up on paperwork, only managers. And Dean's like, well, I'm the only guy who looks like me. It had to be me. But then my brother found Dean's business card in his
it's crazy.
drawer. So I mean, it's fate, it's kismet.
It's full circle. Yeah, that's
so. If I could get clean and sober and focus 100% like him, then maybe I'd be opening up for Bill Burr at the Forum. Like
yeah,
he just did.
For
Holy
fucking
shit.
sure. I know. I mean, he's definitely killed it. He was one of the first people I met at the Comedy Store. You know, he was kind of like already starting to be king of the Comedy Store when I just was moving to Los Angeles in 2011. But I'd say in closing, can you throw out what you think is one of your biggest failures and one of your biggest accomplishments? Career?
Biggest accomplishments? Probably all happened when I was directing and producing commercials, because I did it in over 7 different countries all over the U.S.
Yeah,
but as far as stand-up goes, is this year's Edinburgh is the fact that the first year I was so overwhelmed by it, and then as you get to the second and third year, you sort of understand how the system works. And this Edinburgh was my favorite accomplishment because I wasn't stressed out. Like a lot of times you go into a show and, you get a 50-seater room. You don't want a bigger one. There's 3,000 shows going on, and I have time slots that compete with somebody big like a Jim Jeffries level kind of guy.
Right.
I'm lucky if I can get 50, or I'd rather sell out 50, but there'd be nights I'd get in there and there's 10. And that used to kill me. And I used to go, oh, fuck, how can I get more people in here? And I realized there's nothing I can do now. Tomorrow I can fix it. Tomorrow I can promote harder. I can see my flyers, see what's going on. But I learned to just zen out and perform for the crowd that I had right then and there. Yeah. And enjoy what they were. And so that's my biggest accomplishment, I think, is just realizing that moment I have on stage is a gift. And don't ruin it by thinking about what's not in the room. Think about what's in the room. I hate when comics, they go in and they yell at the crowd because there's only, room holds.
It's not their fault that they're the only people here.
They're the ones who
They're the ones who are here.
Don't make them want to leave, right?
Exactly.
And that would be one of my biggest accomplishments is just realizing to appreciate the fact that I'm lucky enough to hold a microphone and talk into it and make people laugh or interested or whatever they're doing. My biggest failure is that I don't have the energy I had when I was 25 to call people every day and do all this stuff. Is that now I'm like, oh, fuck, it's 5 on Monday. I guess I'll put the veils in next Monday. Yeah. And you start doing that over and over and you realize that I think it's because I'm 48 now. I don't have the drive of a 25-year-old kid. Sure. And I also realized that as a 25-year-old kid who kind of made it almost to where he wanted to be, that it was soul-sucking. And so now I'm like, what if this is soul-sucking? And I know it's not, but I'm like, you could – yeah. I don't know. It's the fear of failure where you're like, well, if I don't put myself out there, I can't fail. I think that's what entertainment is, period. I've talked to a lot of people about this, but like even people I know that are wildly successful that I'm like, oh man, I wish I was doing that. They're like, it doesn't really feel like I'm doing anything. Like I feel like no matter what, it's always a learning process. And then eventually we die and hopefully we leave something good behind in our wake. I want to live up to the Bronston that people tell me about. Yeah. I want to live up to the Bronston that isn't insecure. Like, I think because of my size and testosterone, as I walk into a room like I own it, it's just something I learned a long time ago. Sure. But in my head, I don't own anything. I'm just like, what am I doing here? I'm a fraud. Well, I'm excited to see when that finally clicks for you, because I feel like you have such an introspective type of comedy. And next year I'm going to be at Edinburgh, so I plan to see you crush that next 3 hours. Because what'd you do, like 2 hours there? I did two separate hours. I did a political hour, but then I did that drunk hour to wash Trump out of my brain every night. Yeah. And again, like I told you, it ended up being my favorite
So we'll just
philosophical thing. So I'm actually going to do that. Just like the political show I did the last 4 years with the same name and it said number 4 or whatever. This late night show I'm going to put in the slot where more people will see it, and I'm going to keep the same one. So it was called Spilt Milk. And it all came from the picture of the milk all over my face, which I'm sure
I love.
Favorite. It's my favorite portrait I've ever seen. I just happen to be the guy in it. Like I have a huge blow up in my house, and it's the detail. Chick McClure took the picture. He's awesome. So and so I had the picture, and then I go, well, what's this thing going to be called? And I'm like, okay, Spilt Milk. And I'm like, well, what's Spilt Milk? Oh, crying over things that don't matter. And then I remembered this whole bit I had called Gotta Do, which is the only thing you gotta do is die. So between now and then, just live your fucking life. Like,
it's true. And it sounds like a dark thing. Like whenever you say that to people, they're like, oh, whoa. And you're like, that's not a negative thing. It's just a fact. So like you have to keep that in mind and just fucking try to do your best while we're here with the time we got. So how can people find you? How can they follow you? How can they see what you're up to?
All social media at Bronston Jones, BronSton Jones. And every Wednesday night, if I'm in Los Angeles, I will be at the Venice Townhouse doing the Venice Underground Comedy. And I have a new podcast coming out called That's My Story. And part of my story is that we recorded it at Edinburgh, and I still need to get it out. And it's just been going back and forth with the audio guy. But once it releases, there's already 20 in the can. I
was just going to say, how many episodes do you have? Yeah, That's cool.
We got 20. So it's just a matter of working out some details, but it should be up hopefully next week.
Maybe we can team up sometime and cross over Beers with Old People with your...
Hell yeah. Well, what's your age limit going to be? 50? Because I'll be there a year and a half.
Right. Yeah, I'd say like 55 plus. I don't know. Depends on how old people want to let themselves feel like they are. Because I don't think age is a negative thing. So hopefully other people don't as well.
Well, maybe you should have to say, are you an old person? Because I'm old. I still act like a 25-year-old, but I know I'm old. I have a lot of wisdom I didn't have at 25.
Right.
I'm not using it, but I got it.
My first episode is going to be with the original Hollywood projectionist. He's the only Hollywood projectionist, I think, remaining from the original guys that used to actually project the movies live when people used to dress up to come to the movies, like back in the...
Oh, yeah, the movie palaces?
Yeah.
That was one of the coolest things when I moved to LA, is seeing like the ones in Westwood and the ones in Hollywood Boulevard, is just going in and looking up at the ceilings and going, holy shit.
Yeah, like in the 30s and 40s, and people actually went out to see the movies. It wasn't like, just, like frolicking, after you've had a workout or been at yoga, like people dress the fuck up to go. So
they used to do that to fly. Remember that?
Yeah. It'll be cool to hear his stories and hear about that. And anyway, you can follow me at NPH Comedy. My name is Natasha Pearl Hansen. I am not Neil Patrick Harris, NPH Comedy. And you can follow the podcast at Future Role Model. You can follow the Comedy Network and all the wonderful comedians and podcasts on it at Comedy Pop-Up or at CPU Podcasts. And we are done.